will share my screen, because otherwise the recording is a pain to sort out all the things that I've had to do. I'll let in Keith. Hi Keith, you've caught us right at the very start, so we're about to get underway. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a quick icebreaker, then we'll go through the plan for today. I'll run through some housekeeping, bit of previously on, and catch you up with where we are at with a couple of bits, have some exciting new news. Then we're going to focus on flex and hail and ride stops, focusing a lot on how you're actually coding them up in your local authorities. Now, I'm going to double check, because I know Tim is not from an LA, Keith is not from an LA, and Amy is not from a local authority. Ian and Paul, before I plan what we're doing, please let me know if you're not from an LA. If neither of you from an LA, I will change this ever so slightly as to how we discuss this.
I'm from local authority.
Yes. Okay, so Ian, you are the poor person who is going to be, but I will also ask a lot of the others questions about how you interpret those. So it's okay, Ian, please don't feel like I'm putting you under the microscope here. And then we're going to do a little bit of user research, because we just want to run through how things are going, and then we've got a feedback corner. So, taking a breath, icebreaker. I am going to create a list of people, and I'm not sure which way around I will go today. Actually, I might go from the top down. So we're going to do an icebreaker. So you'll do your name, your pronoun to use he, she, or they, or anything else. Where you're from, local authority, software provider, etc. And the question for today is, will MaaS save us? Will mobility as a service save us? And that's as open as you want it to be. So, hi, I'm Dr. J. Use they as a pronoun for those who haven't met me. I'm the service designer, business analyst, hand wavy type here at DFT. Will MaaS save us? I don't think so. It's got some great ideas, but sometimes it seems to be reinventing stuff that already exists. But then I also have the bias of living in London, where a single payment tap will take me across any mode of transport apart from a taxi that I want to use. Oh, and some of the micromobility services. So a single tap will take me across most of the transport that I wish to use. So I'm going to go to Amy.
Hello.
I'm just going to put Tricia. I'm just going to put you on mute. Oh, thank you.
Cool. Yep, Amy Brown, Open Data Platform Manager at Travelline. Pronouns are she or they, and I have no idea how to answer that question. Will, I don't know. I don't think I know enough about it as a topic. I think I need to go do some research on it and listen to what everyone else is going to say for their answer, because I don't have a clue.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. We're going to throw it then to Hannah.
Morning, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm one of the product owners on NaPTAN, but I am unfortunately leaving next week, Thursday, kind of handing it over to the capable hands of Dr. J. In terms of pronouns, I am using she, her. And do I think MaaS will save us? I think it's still too early to comment on that topic. So that's my views.
I love the way this could be an entire. The icebreaker will be everyone saying no comment. Ian, you're the next one up.
Hi all, I'm Ian Jakes. I'm from Leicestershire County Council. Pronouns are he, him. I'm not entirely sure on the question, but on answering the question as such, but I did hear a podcast about it, so I might steer on to that rather than leave me to answer, if that's okay.
Oh yes, send us put the podcast link in the chat, please, Ian. That would be great. Thank you for that. No Keith, you're the next one up.
Keith Willis from React Accessibility, a software provider. And no, MaaS will not solve things, at least in the next 25 years, depending on your definition of what MaaS is.
Thank you. And which pronouns do you use, Keith? He, she, or they?
He.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Paul, you're the next one up.
Hi, Paul Everson, product manager at Trapeze. And when I work out what MaaS is, I'll answer the question. I'm a he.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Tim, you're the next one up.
So Tim Rivet, he, him. I don't know what I fall under in terms of where I come from, but because I'm not a software provider or a local authority.
Tim, what do you do?
Data expert, run Artig, run various other groups, consult, many hats. Will MaaS save us? I don't think it will in the UK. I think it has a bit more hope elsewhere, and we'll learn really how it can help us from experiences from elsewhere, particularly some of the Nordic countries where they're a bit further ahead of us.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Tricia, you're the last one up.
So right, from Nottinghamshire County Council, and pronouns she, her. The MaaS question, I remember going to Artig conferences what feels like over 10 years ago, and MaaS was going to be the next big thing, and 10 years down the line, it's still not out there. So I'm not convinced it's going to save us if we're still talking about it 10 years later.
Thank you, Tricia, and excellent point. So what the plan for today is I'm just going to quickly run through some housekeeping. I'll go through the previously on NaPTAN moments, and then we're going to focus most of our time talking about Flex and hail and ride stops. I'm taking this time to try and ask you how you are all doing some of the pieces, simply because I'm seeing differences within the data, and I'm trying to dig in and just understand how yous are all doing it. And there's no saying there's a right or wrong. It's really trying to discover all of the different ways and think about how we allow those local variations, or should we allow those local variations, and why they're there. And then we're going to do a little bit of user research on the managed removal service, because we've got a couple of questions, and rather than book people in for an hour, we've decided to do a little bit of group research just to see if we're going in the right direction, because we're starting the private beta, and then there'll be a feedback corner. Excuse me, I've drunk my coffee too fast. Housekeeping. There's a YouTube channel where you can watch all of these again, as if you ever want to. You can follow us on Eventbrite, and you get told the moment that I make these live, so you actually get them slightly before the email comes out, which is our email newsletter if you don't already belong to it. We don't just tell you about the meetings that are coming up, we will also let you know if there are any incidents with NaPTAN, with the NaPTAN service, or anything that you need to be aware of. So, a bit of previously on NaPTAN. The archive service or managed removal, this is currently in development at the moment. It's been our key deliverable for this quarter, for this quarter. We have taken the service design and your feedback, and yesterday we did our first private beta onboarding of somebody. We onboarded them, we took them through, and they removed a single stop from the system, and that went smoothly. There were no technical hitches. There was one user hitch, but that was because I didn't quite understand what I was doing. So there's a couple of small improvements, and we now know how we're going to roll this out to the first local authority. We've got a choice of 2, and we're going to go and have a chat with them and figure out which one will come in first, and they will come on in September. And then we will continue rolling this out. Just to give you an idea, we are doing this very slowly because there are some things that are irreversible in the process. So we want to make sure that everything is completely set up. There's going to be no hitches for the local authorities. There's going to be no problems in understanding. So we're taking it slowly. This is not like the move from the old server to the new service, which we did 2021, 22, where we had to kind of push you across because the old server basically was almost going to die on us if we touched it. This is something where we can take our time and make sure that we get everybody on board and working really well. And the outcome of doing all of this is that we get rid of a lot of stops from the system that no longer exist, and that means that we can start to really work on the data quality, defining it as consistency, completeness and accuracy of all the different fields, and we can start to really dig in once we get rid of the kind of dead stops out the system. So that's what we're aiming for. It's a bit of a long-term plan, but it is. We did our private beta, our first private beta yesterday. Street versus schema, it's still ongoing, trying to figure out why the street and the schema don't entirely match in some places, why there are some differences, why there are some local differences, and really understanding those. Our SRO was quite interested in how this happens and what we can do about it. So we're starting to have a look into that. Locations precisely and accurately. We now use the Ordnance Survey calculations to figure this out. There is some work going on within Department for Transport around how we work with Ordnance Survey to build out some of these tools or get some of the licenses for local authorities, or what we do. So keep an ear out for that. We are talking with various people, but if you are converting an Eastings Northings to a lat long, there is only one way that you should be doing it, which is via this Ordnance Survey page calculation. It will ask you for your elevation. I usually use 1 meter because most of this country is quite low lying, and I know there are some hills, but it's low lying compared to my home country. So if you put in 1 meter, you're going to get a relatively good and consistent latitude longitude conversion. We understand the difference between coaches and buses. We talked through what the difference is. There are coach references and what we call coach stops or coach references within NaPTAN. These are completely withdrawn. You can start taking that data out. So if you've got a coach reference against a stop, you can actually take that data out. We no longer need it. Nobody is consuming it. We can start to deprecate this data, and that'll be another very long, slow process. Fixing the lat long, that's underway. We're talking about it. We're still trying to figure out how the codes we use, how you create ATCO codes and NaPTAN codes. We've found more than 20 ways of doing it, and we will come to some of that in a moment. And data retention. So I presented the other week how we're going to retain certain amounts of data for different periods of time, just make it all very clear for you. We are going to be deploying that in the coming months. So we will keep you updated with how that goes. Should be no impact to you. There may be a new page that just explains how much data you can get. So to get us all on the same page, we're just going to quickly talk through our understanding that we've all met as to what is a bus stop. A bus stop is where the bus stops. Sounds reductive, but it's the best explanation of what one is. A bus stop is a fixed stop, or a fixed bus stop is measured as a 1 by 1 meter square centered on where the passenger needs to stand to get on the bus. Now, in most cases, this will also be co-located with the flag. Where there is a difference, it's focused on where the passenger stands, not where the flag is, not where the B is or anything like that. It's giving us a consistent way. So if you're measuring a new bus stop, this is the sort of way that would be great if we could do it. We've got Eastings Northings and we convert them via the standard. And then we know that every bus stop is represented in the data set and in the world with various codes, and the data set codes and the world codes, what people see in the physical world, overlap and are overlaid. There's indicators, there's ATCO codes, there's NaPTAN codes, and the NaPTAN codes and and or the ATCO codes are what people use to create the QR codes that are used for displaying bus information. And that real-time bus information comes from various feeds. For example, Amy's Travel Line feed is one of the ones that a lot of people link to from their NaPTAN code, from their QR codes. Some bus operators link to their own websites. So the QR codes literally can go to anywhere, and it is dependent on the bus operator and the local authority where they go, and how they're hooked up. So, running on to the main part of today. So, the first question I'm going to ask you all, and no points, no points whatsoever for telling me I should read the schema. For you, what is the difference between an FLX stop and a hail and ride stop? And how do you think about that? And anyone's welcome to put their hand up and tell me what the differences are. Trisha.
For me, FLX stops are defined by an area. So if you live in what is a zone that's predefined, you can be picked up and use a DRT service. Hail and ride is usually on a section of road only, and you would have to create individual hail and ride sections for each section of road.
Cool. Does that meet anyone else? Is everyone fine with this as example sections of road? Sorry, trying to type and talk. Slow down. Does anyone else want to add anything to this? Is there anything that we need to focus on?
Yeah. Well, hail and rides also have a start and an end point in NaPTAN. You have to put a start. You have to put a easting and northing in for the start, and easting and northing for the end, and then a centre point for where the pin should go. So it says that anywhere along this section of road you can hail and ride the bus.
You are so answering so many of the questions that are further along. Ian.
Sorry.
No, Trisha, do not apologise. We can fly through some of this. If we do this meeting in 90 minutes, I get more coffee time. Life is good. Ian, is this how you also see Flex and Hail and Ride in your local authority?
Yeah, I think Trisha's outlined it very well indeed.
Excellent. So this could be a very, very quick meeting on the Flex and Hail and Ride stuff. So I believe this is a small bus, one of those little community buses, the single deckers with a door, and they seat around maximum of 20 to 25 people. I believe that Hail and Rides are only for small buses. Is this true? Is this a bias that I've got simply because that's how we use it in London, or is this a real thing?
No, it's a real thing. Can be used by any bus.
Right, but they're mostly the small buses.
Well, mostly, but we have full single decks using hail and ride sections around new housing developments while we work out the best place to put stops.
Mostly single decks. Okay.
But as I say, we wouldn't just say only a single decker can hail and ride. If an operator sees fit that they want to operate hail and ride, the registration document specifies this service will, the operator has to tick boxes, and it will say this service uses all stops, and then hail and ride, we're safe to do so.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're safe to do so. No, that's absolutely brilliant. And you've brought up something that I understood from the previous one of hail and rides are often used as kind of like the earliest evolution of where to put bus stops, because you then figure out that where people want the bus stops to be using hail and ride. Tim, I'll come to you in a second. If Trisha and Ian, so you're using hail and rides to figure out where the bus stops might need to be because that's where people are hailing the bus. Is that kind of how you're using it?
Sometimes it's that actually people don't like street clutter and they cause so much controversy that most people know this is where we wait in the village.
Avoiding controversy.
Yeah, I mean, that's when we start using things like custom and practice stops.
Yeah.
But if we've got community shopper buses and the community shopper buses are out there, and you've perhaps got a more elderly community and a long stretch of road, and we don't want them walking 500 meters to the stop, you know, some of our drivers do like to drop people at their doors, which you do see in counties versus the bigger cities.
Oh yes, I can totally imagine. Tim.
So the hail and ride section where I have to get my bus from has 40 plus, 50 plus seat buses running on it as standard. And in Sheffield, there is at least one section of hail and ride that's served by double deckers.
Okay. Buses only has one air, one S in the middle. Sheffield, excellent. That's really good to know. Like I said, it's a bias that I think I picked up in London because we only hail and ride down some very small stretches with the smaller community style buses, although while they're community buses, they aren't the community buses that Tricia is talking about. That's just my nickname for the single deckers that do the loops, all the looping around. It take forever to get from point A to point B. Ian.
Hi, yes, I think the size of the bus is probably not necessarily a factor on whether you choose to use that type of stop or not. Although the general trend in our area is that they would be used by smaller vehicles because these hail and ride stops are generally in more rural localities, smaller villages where having a hail and ride stop area allows an additional stopping point out with the main stops, which might be in the middle of the village, for example. So we tend to have them in those rural localities.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. So I know the next diagram is wrong, but I want you to explain to me why this is wrong. So now, because I was trying to draw stuff, the drawing a line didn't show up very well. So the red box is in fact a line. It's a line that's outlined in red. For a small lane, so a small kind of very, very small country lane, can you have one hail and ride that covers both directions?
No, you have to define a direction within NaPTAN itself. Because you need to know which direction the bus is travelling to know which side of the road to wait.
Mm-hmm.
Because
yeah.
You're going to direct somebody to go, I'm going to go here for my bus, and then it whizzes past because it's gone the other way.
Ah, yes, of course. To catch bus, yes. And you haven't waved at it. Excellent. No, that's good to know. I knew that this was something that I found one, but what I realized is potentially the road is a one-way road, and I had misinterpreted it. So that was just me trying to figure this out. So on a larger road, so here's a quick question. We've got a road, and I know that we do it on both sides, and we've got our entry and exit points, and we have a bearing. If the road bends, say if your hail and ride section has a nice swoopy curve that curves 90 degrees or so, is the bearing the entry point or the exit point from the hail and ride section?
The bearing point is usually the centre point of the hail and ride section.
Okay.
Because you have to put a pin in the centre of where your hail and ride section is. Yeah. That's where your NaPTAN pin goes, and that's where I define my bearing. Other people might do it differently, but that's how I do it.
This is that other people might do it differently is exactly what I'm trying to pin down Tricia. So thank you for that one. That's a really good explanation of how you do it. Ian, how do you do it? Do you do entry or exit? And Paul as well.
The center point would be where the point where we choose the bearing. So, you know, it's determined by the direction of the bus at the center point when it would serve that center point.
Excellent. And Paul, do you have any thoughts on that from Trapeze?
I think wasn't there DFT did something about 5 or more years ago about whether the bearing should be the sort of instantaneous direction of the road at that coordinate, or whether it was more the sort of wider view of services would be heading in a particular bearing. I can't remember what the conclusion was, but ultimately it's the center point.
Tim, do you remember? Because I only remember the I've only been here since 2020, so I don't have quite the institutional memory.
But Paul's I was going to say Paul's memory is short, but it's not. It's long, because it wasn't 5 years ago. It was more like 10 plus years, because it was Roger Slevin that was involved, and he hasn't been around for a good many
Things in the
years.
mirror can appear closer than what they really are. Right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. And it should be the bearing should be the direction at which the bus real-time system would be showing. So that may be the instantaneous point in some cases, but it's probably not. It's probably something more of an average of the curve of the road at that point.
Okay, interesting. That's Keith.
I'm totally wrong. I never actually do it, but I would have gone from when you've got the start and the exit. I would have had a straight line and taken the bearing from the middle, the direction it was going, something like that. I would have done.
Even if it turned a corner.
Well, yeah. If it was you know, the bottom left-hand corner of your screen going to the right-hand corner of your screen, for instance, the start and exit, and it had a big curve in it, I would have just gone from the centre line from the 2 points and then chose the general direction the bus should have been going. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I would have done, but I'm not saying anyone does that, but that makes sense to me.
The original requirement for the bearing was to help differentiate where you've got 2 buses that are going opposite directions, which direction the bus was going in from a GPS plot, for real-time systems journey matching and stopping, triggering of a departure when the vehicle's going in the opposite direction, which is why you can't take a general bearing from the start to the end of a road section. It has to be what the bus will be reporting in the vicinity of the bus stop.
But if the bus stop is a stretch of road, that makes it really, really fascinating as to how. So it's based on reporting of RTI. This is a nice little fascinating way. Yeah.
For real-time systems, it will always be the centre point of the hail and ride section that would be used for time calculation purposes.
So that leads me to another quick question of this. How long is a HAR section? How short is a HAR section? And Tim, I know that you have thoughts, but I want to get Ian's
people,
more.
Yeah.
Because I know that you have the defined thoughts, but I'm interested in how it's done in practice. I mean, I could go and convert a pile of them and get how many meters between the start and stop, but it's easier to ask people, honestly. Tricia, or Ian, or Paul. Tricia.
I'm just trying to think what I've done in the past. I haven't necessarily defined them in number of meters. because I'm just thinking if you're going down a big around little estates and communities, so I usually try and do them for the length of the road if it's straight, and if it curves too much I split them into two. So that's why on a curve it's slightly different, because I can't try and figure my bearing. So you almost have like Hale and Ride section number 1 on this road, and then section number 2. But I haven't actually thought about how big I would do it. I just look at that road and go, oh yeah, that looks like I can just put one in. I'll put one in. I think it's just experience. You just go, oh yeah, that looks about right.
Trisha has an eye for it. Ian, how do you do them?
I don't think we have any kind of hard and fast rule along how long or how large that Hale and Ride stop area might be. I think, the determining factor really is the geography of the location you're looking to put it in. So, if you've got a straight section of road that's, 400, 500 meters long, that probably would be the length of the Hale and Ride section. I don't think I've kind of created ones that are any longer than that, but it's not a fixed rule. It's just that that's the sort of maximum length that we've ever really needed to generate.
So you couldn't end up with like one between a village. Just trying to think of between two villages that could be like a mile or more.
No, we wouldn't.
No.
Because each in NaPTAN you have to give a locality. So if you would create one in one village and one in the next village.
Okay. In locality and split like that. Okay, that's really good to know, because that really helps me see how you think about it. Ian, does that match your thinking as well?
Absolutely, yes. You wouldn't put a Hale and Ride across two localities. You generate two separate Hale and Ride areas in each individual locality. I guess as well, in terms of the actual sort of length of road you might use. I mean, if you identify if that's the side road, a side street, or a prominent landmark, how far realistically can you move away from that? So, and I think that's probably another reason why we've only sort of done that 400, 500 meter length. I haven't really identified a need to go sort of beyond that.
Gotcha. No, that makes a ton of sense, and thank you for that.
I would agree with Ian on that as well. Because yes, as you say, you're suddenly moving further and further away from your landmark, and how can people find where to get on the bus?
Stand on this road and wave your arm it just seems so it's a very weird thing. So very quickly, we're going to touch on a little bit of naming in the ATCO codes. Do you do anything with the names or with the ATCO code or NaPTAN code, but mostly ATCO code, to make it reflect that it's a Hale and Ride in the common name and the short common name or anything like that?
We don't. Oh, so I'll let you speak, Ian.
Sorry, I was just going to say we don't do that either. We don't change the ATCO code, to denote whether it's a Hale and Ride or a custom. We wouldn't do that. It would just be the sort of standard ATCO setup we do.
I remember once when, because of the county, we have a lot of both way stops where the villagers only want one pole and they'll just wait on the opposite side. So when the rules changed and you had to create a NaPTAN code for both sides, so one would be a marked location and the other would be a custom and practice stop.
Yeah.
In our common names, we put the common name and then did a hyphen and BW for both ways, and we got told off for it and had to go and remove them all.
Oh no.
So yeah. So
removed. Okay, that's I'm sad because you had to do the extra work. I'm also sad because I understand that would have made sense to the locals, and that's kind of one of the weird little pieces we're starting to pick apart and really understand.
Yeah, we always ensure there's a both ways sticker on our bus stop flags, so to help, because any marked location, whether it's both ways or not, in our county actually does have a at least a pole flag and timetable case. We've removed everything from lamp columns or, stand by this post box or this telegraph pole.
So you don't have any outside number 47 or outside number 9 kind of notes on yours anymore, Tricia?
No, other than if it's in the indicator of the stop, because you've got a long stretch of road and no side road. So. Yeah. And
trust me, indicators a whole other can of worms I'm going to eventually open up. I want to ask a question because you've brought it up, and I think both of you do it. So I have a hail and ride stop, and I have it for some time, and we decide after 6 months or so, hey, this place, everyone seems to stand about here outside the library, for example. So let's make that a custom stop and not do a hail and ride across the area. Quick question for you. Do you create a new stop, or do you convert the stop that you've already got from a hail and ride to a custom?
Best practice says you should create a new stop.
And what do you actually do with Tim blocking his ears so that he doesn't hear?
No, I actually do create a new stop.
Ian, what do you do? And you don't have to say we can block Tim's ears again.
I guess the scenario you outlined would probably, if there was a significant enough demand at that location, at that precise location, and that was the sort of the passengers identified that as the boarding point, we'd probably look to create a formalised stop at that location if we can. Certainly something we'd consider. I'm not sure we'd create a new NaPTAN point in doing that.
Cool. Might not create a new point. I just wanted to kind of understand, because whether there's an evolution or a step change, and I can see that the best practice might be to say, oh, we get rid of the hail and ride and we put in and we have the custom there. And I'm just trying to understand if some people do it that way, and some people go, okay, so we take that hail and ride, we know where it's going to be, and we just convert it to a custom stop because we know that's where people are going to stand and the name and the ATCO code is going to remain the same. Just me trying to understand and think about the number of revisions. And Tim's going to tell me what it says in the schema to score null point.
Because I don't want null point to be told off. I was actually going to ask a question of Keith and Paul as two suppliers of NaPTAN management systems. Do you allow people to change the bus stop type?
I can answer Paul's, because yes, I can. Because if I have a custom and practice stop and we decide actually we're going to put a marked stop there, then you can change the custom to marked. So if you can change custom to marked, it will let me select and change it. So
NKD, isn't it? Yes, because it's wicked. Yeah, sorry, I only remember it because it's the same as the Alco Pop.
Yeah. I've never tried myself to change a hail and ride to a custom or marked, because the hail and ride has a separate then page with the start and end point, and I don't know if that would still remain or whether it'd take it off.
Excellent.
I think, so
throw it to Keith.
We don't let them change the stop type, but we let them change the bus stop type between hail and ride, flexible and so forth.
Okay,
but not the stop type.
Okay, so can change, so React, sorry, just let me try to write this down. Can change bus stop type, but not stop type.
Yeah, the stop type being on street, airport
Yeah,
and so
yeah,
forth.
yeah.
From my recollection.
Yeah. It's no, it's not OTH. I should know it. I can't. On street.
Yeah, it's BCT and some like bus stop and coach.
Oh, BCT and BCS.
Yeah, those.
Yeah. I had to try and explain to my SRO that Victoria Bus Station and Victoria Coach Station are both exactly the same coding within NaPTAN, even though they're very, very different stations, and they are different stations. They are coded quite differently in some parts. The bulk part of their coding is exactly the same, and it blew our minds. But that's just an entire aside on the BCT, BCS moments. Paul, any small tweaks from Trapeze that we should be aware of?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if the schemas are one thing, aren't they, and best practice is another. So if it turns out that you can't transfer one stop type to another, then we'd have to put some rules in to stop that from happening, but I don't think they exist. Wearing a slightly different hat, so we also provide journey planning systems and things like that, and on street and online. If you do have two stops and you create a new stop, then I guess there is a small risk that you end up with two departure boards at that same location for the two stops that you've created. So for things like on street publicity, that could cause a problem. It might be better if it's,
It also brings us along to the bit that I'm going to do some user research on, which is getting rid of stops that no longer physically exist. So if you've changed a hail and ride to become a custom because on that estate road everyone's decided that that's the place to stop and it's the best place to stop, and you've put all the planning effort in to get a pole and everything, and you've gotten rid of the hail and ride, we need to make sure you can get rid of the hail and ride from NaPTAN completely, because you're never going to bring it back, most likely. So it's kind of one of those little linking up or segues that we might have on this. So Tricia and Ian answered this before, so I'm just going to make sure that I've understood it right. Here is our line of a hail and ride. Here is the XML for it. So we've got a start point and we've got an end point, and the location here is bang in the middle. You do it bang in the middle all the time, every time. Is that correct? Tricia?
For me, not necessarily, because if you've got a nice straight piece of road, but you've got a little close or a little, I wouldn't necessarily put the centre point looking like it was in the middle of another road.
Okay.
So I'd slightly offset it, but in most instances, it's bang centre in the middle.
Cool. Of roads. Right. I get what you mean.
I'm just thinking for Google purposes, if you were then looking at a hail and ride stop on NaPTAN, and then it looked like it was in the middle of a different road, it'd just look weird.
Yeah. No, I totally get you, and I think you've focused a lot on what the customer would see and how they would interpret it. Ian, much the same.
Much the same as Tricia. Yeah, I think generally it would be that centre point right in the middle of the hail and ride stop area. But I think there would be a variance for a road, or if it was identified as a general pickup point, perhaps align it with that. So there is a bit of variance, but generally that's centre point.
Keith.
Okay, where is the centre point in your schema?
Sorry, what?
Where is the actual centre point in the schema that you're showing?
Sorry, I went through it above. So you've got your start and exit points there, start and end points there, and then up the top here, you've got a location point that's given for the stop, and that was that I was trying to understand the relationship between this point, which is always given, and these 2 points. I can see that it's contained somewhere within these numbers, but I wanted to understand how people thought about it. Does that make sense, Keith?
I'm just curious that it's just how I don't think from my memory our editor lets you choose a center point. So whether it's automatically done and I don't know or not is my question. So do systems allow you to put a center point like within a stop area? You can choose your center point or you can auto your center point. I'm just curious the systems people use, does it automatically put the center point from the start and end, or do people actually choose their center point in those systems?
Paul, Ian, or Trisha? Or Trisha, you use Trapeze, don't you? So
so does Ian. We have the same system. We actually share it.
Okay.
Oh, this is brilliant. Okay, so from the other system, do you auto your center point, or do you get to choose to put it in?
We get to choose it. In fact, I'm not 100% sure it auto chooses it. You specifically have to either click somewhere to put a pin or put these things in or things in manually.
Excellent. Just before I move on, what did I forget to ask about Helen Ride? Or have I asked all the stupid dumb questions? And Amy's like, oh my God, I didn't know this. I didn't know there was so much you could ask about a Helen Ride stop.
I think the other thing I was going to add is that we're talking about making a Hail and Ride stop, a custom stop, or a MaaS stop.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very rare occurrence, but it's not entirely unknown to sort of do the reverse of that. You've got a MaaS stop, for whatever reason the stop infrastructure is removed, and you've got the option to create a Hail and Ride area going forward.
Would you do it as a new stop, or would you do it as a conversion?
We retain the same. Typically, the times I've done it, we've retained the same NaPTAN point, the same ATCO code, the same details, just marked it Hail and Ride and added that beginning and end point.
Gotcha. So because the ATCO code and the NaPTAN code are being used by people anyway.
Yeah, so it would still appear on Google. The center point would be, where that old stop, that flag and pole was, but you've just got your.
Yeah. Are there examples where a section of road would have both a fixed route and a flexible service, so that you would have to have a fixed and a Hail and Ride stop?
Oh, interesting, Paul. I don't know.
There must be somewhere. There will be somewhere in the country. Yeah.
We wouldn't. I mean, we'd just have either Hail and Ride or a MaaS stop. That would be, and then you've got your flex zone. You can obviously have the additional layer of a flex zone, which I think we're going to come on to speak about. But yeah, it wouldn't be both Hail and Ride and MaaS. It's just one or the other on a given road.
But potentially a journey planning system or some sort of website would pick up on the fact that it's a Hail and Ride code, and it would perhaps mark in a section of road where you can get on that bus service, where that wouldn't necessarily be true for the fixed route service.
Paul, I hate to tell you this, but I don't think the downstream systems are that smart. I'm sure yours are, and please correct me. But the poking around that I've done, the center point seems to be what most systems report from and use. They don't seem to understand Hail and Ride. So if you do have something that understands Hail and Ride as a start and stop, as starting and stopping and things like that, you're well in advance of a lot of people, and it'd be really fascinating to have a conversation around that.
Sure. Okay, but from a data point, I guess the question is, can a fixed route service use a Hail and Ride NaPTAN?
Really good question. I honestly don't know the answer.
Mhm.
Kind of
It,
fixed.
it works the other way, that a flexible service, in however you define it, could use both fixed stops and hail and ride stops, couldn't it? It works that way around, but not the other way around.
Yeah, and I think it might also be down to the bus operator and the driver, because the more I'm understanding, and Tricia will hopefully help me out here, the more I'm understanding about a lot of the smaller bus operators and bus services, there's a lot that the drivers do that might not quite be 100% what's in NaPTAN. They'll drop somebody off outside their house because they're close enough to a hail and ride section, or the person's got extra shopping today or something like that. So as long as it's safe to drop somebody off, there seems to be a little bit more leeway in a lot of spaces that you don't see in the urban areas. Would that be right, Tricia?
I would say yes. And I'm thinking about with Stagecoach, some of their local depots, and when they have new drivers, one driver will always stop and then another one doesn't. There's a new driver, and then that's when we tend to get the complaints and kind of have an actual bus stop. So it is always down to whether the driver thinks he feels safe, and some drivers are follow the rules more than others. And it does cause conflict, particularly for a local authority, if somebody's complaining that one driver drops her off at home, but the other one I have to walk 400 meters from the bus stop and cannot have a hail and ride. And we have some instances where one operator will not run hail and ride whatsoever unless there's an actual stop there. No, I'm not stopping. So
wow, that's fascinating. I'm going to that's really interesting to know, and I'm not going to ask you to call out anyone because I know this is recorded and published. So let's run across. Okay, what do I forget to? So changing our minds, we've left hail and ride behind, and we're now going to talk about the flexible zones. And I know that we use flex and DRT interchangeably. DRT doesn't actually exist. Flex is the way that we code up in NaPTAN a certain type of stop where somebody can phone up and get transport within that area. Often it's also mobility as a service. Sometimes it's referred to. Now, I believe, again, going back to my drawing of a very small bus, I believe that the flex zones are only served by small buses in the flex service. There might be other services within the zone that these connect up to, but they're only the small buses, maybe 16 seaters or even less, that run these flex services. Is that correct?
In data terms, it doesn't make a difference. Stops and services are two separate concepts, right?
Yes, it doesn't really make a difference. It's more how we talk about things and how we understand things. Because if I'm constantly thinking of a bus only as a double decker, I need to explain to some of the people who are thinking about this that there are other sizes of things that are buses that run on these services. It's just making sure that I understand the contexts well enough. Does that make sense, Paul?
I can understand where you're coming from. As I say, from data terms, it the two are separate, and I would never talk about a particular type of NaPTAN can only be used by a particular type of bus, because that just in data doesn't exist as a limitation. No,
and it doesn't exist. It's more for explaining to people and giving people the right context on the services. Otherwise, especially when talking to a lot of very London-based people, what we think of as a bus is a double-decker, and I struggle to get them to think of other things. So just trying to explain to them, these services are run by very small buses, and that's why they can do some of the things that they do, because some of the roads might be too small. That's some of the questions that pop up. Tim?
So I don't think it's universally the case. There certainly used to be some bus services that were run by normal single deck vehicles that had flexible parts at the end.
Flex at the end. So these are the 20 to 30 seaters.
No, up to 50-seat ones. So not midi buses, but proper full-size ones.
Yeah.
Whether they exist or not, I don't know, but I'm seeing increasing number of places that have flexible zones at the end of fixed timetable routes.
We have one of those.
I know you do, yeah.
I very much dislike it in data terms, but
good.
There
so
we go.
do I.
So asking what might be the obvious question, why do these exist? What user purpose do those offer to the traveller?
what the flex at the end.
Yeah.
So the one service that we have links quite a large village with the main town. And the flexible element is everything north of that are smaller villages.
Okay.
So it will only operate there if they've booked it at least 2 hours in advance by phoning a number that can book up to 14 days. And it just means that what will happen is the bus will always do its one-way loop around the village and back again unless somebody books it.
Okay. So it goes around the village, and if I book it, it will go to the little hamlet.
Another village, yes. Mm-hmm.
Hamlet that's about half a mile away,
Mm-hmm.
and drop me off, and then come back and finish the loop around the village. So just trying to, you could see me drawing a map in the air with my finger. Hopefully that made a bit of sense.
Except some of mine are more like 5 and 10 miles away.
Okay. And they can only book it by phoning. They can't book it from an app.
This one, yes.
Okay.
It's just a historic service that we've always had before we've now started dabbling into actual BRT.
Only by phone. Okay, right. I will go and see if I can find that one in your system, because that's going to amuse me immensely to try to find it and understand it.
You'll find it in Travel Line, but if you try and find it on Google, the stops won't exist. Paul, it doesn't exist in Journey at the moment. You can see the timetable, but you can't in Journey. I was just looking. It does tell the person that it doesn't show the bus stop at all because it's assigned to a flexible zone. Interestingly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Scratching my head on that one. Yeah.
We'll get on to this in a moment then.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating. Ian, do you have any of these madnesses? I won't call them madnesses. Do you have any of these instances?
Flex zones. Yes, we do actually. They're there because one of the DRTs that Nottinghamshire have in their area actually serves some localities within Leicestershire. So we have flex zones which support that service for certain locations. So we do have them.
Cool. Right, Ian. Is it?
It's the most popular bus in town, Ian. Honestly, the locals have nicknamed it the booze bus. It's so busy on a Friday night. People are complaining they can't book it.
What you need is a fixed route service.
Yeah, I was going to say, just even if it's just for a Friday night, and I'll just put that in there, because I'm sure I can totally understand that you don't want people driving, so this is safety. I know that there's a Netco code that I'm splitting, and I can't. No, it's Northamptonshire. That's fine. It's not Nottinghamshire. It's Northamptonshire. It's another N word that starts with N, ends with shire, but it's Northamptonshire that's being split. So I don't ask the silly question. someone's going to write something in. So
Hello,
just
Nick.
making sure,
Yep.
just making sure that we, yes, some are booked by app and web. I'm just very, very curious about this historic services only by phone. And I was just double checking that with Trisha. So the Flex, this is a picture of some roads in grey and a flexible area that's outlined as a complex polygon in red. This is what they are. Everyone's happy with that? Everyone understands what a flex zone is? Sweet. As far as I can tell, a flex zone has no bearing. So a hail and ride needs a bearing somewhere, but within a flex zone, you've got no bearings. Is this correct?
You don't, but the bearing is a required field in NaPTAN, so we just leave it as the automatic default of NOR.
So I don't.
Yeah, so it's not a field that you can leave blank.
Is that in your system or in NaPTAN?
I believe it's NaPTAN. Paul might be able to answer.
Yeah, it's a schema definition, bearings mandatory, irrespective of the stop type.
Interesting, because I'm just saying that because I have here a flex zone that has no bearing. Let me just go. I am going to call a 5-minute break to make some coffee, and in the meantime, I will also quickly have a look on that, because that contradicts what we said in what we found out in the last meeting, point 1. And point 2, it's interesting to understand why there are so many north-facing flexes. Is everyone okay with taking a quick 5-minute to grab a coffee, stretch your legs, and then we'll come back to diving a bit more into flex?
Sure.
Yep, no problem.
Fantastic. Thank you. I just need coffee. I don't want a window. Yes, I do want a window. Where is what I'm after? There we are.
Dr. J, I'm just looking in my NaPTAN data, and the bearing is a drop-down list with a you can't leave this blank, and there is no option to set it blank. So in the system I use, I cannot physically even
Have it
select
blank.
something, have it blank.
Right. So in Trish's system, so that means I need to go and do some slightly different ways of getting at this data, because I have a little thing that I call Pivotee, which is the Excel spreadsheet of doom. And in that, my flexes have no bearings, but it might be picking up something. It might not be picking things up perfectly. So I'm going to borrow somebody who can create a little bit more data analysis for me. Yeah. So in Trish's system, trapeze must have bearing.
And I'm going to get null point and get thrown off the call by reference to the schema.
The schema says it's got to be there. One of the things is how strictly
not for Hail and Ride. It doesn't, Dr. J. It has to be for marked points and unmarked points, but it doesn't have to be for Hail and Ride and flexible.
Tim, you've solved it for me, because in my data, I have very few flexes having bearings, and with what Trisha said, confused me for a moment. So I was also, that's why I said grab a coffee, because I'm just making my coffee in the background. My coffee is brewing in the background. But that's why I went to take a break and quickly check Pivotee, because Pivotee is a version of all of the stops. It's not perfect, and I need to do a little bit of work to make it slightly better, but it allows me to quickly confirm my data sets. And because what I thought I'd found in NaPTAN was no flexes have bearings, but Trisha and everyone's telling me that they do. And you're telling me that they don't need to have, so now I need to go and figure this out. And this might be one of those instances where Paul and Keith have instilled stricter controls than NaPTAN on their systems.
So Hail and Ride, it's optional, but flexible zone, it doesn't, for the centre point at least, it's not an element that's in the schema. Bearing.
Yeah. And Tim, I'm not giving you null point, because you've done the same check that I did when I wrote this and when I worked on this, because I do research to build this. I don't just magic these up out of nowhere. Honest peeps. I did. Tim's like, sometimes seems like you do, but no, I've done quite a bit of research on this. And as far as I understood, that flexes had no bearing. So it's really fascinating that Trisha, Ian, and Paul are somehow, because of trapeze, having to put bearings in even when the schema says no bearings. This to me is completely fascinating, and I would like to dive into it slightly more, but I'm also aware of time, so I just want to make sure when Ian and Paul come back that we can have this conversation for like 5-10 minutes, and then we'll swiftly move along. Is Paul back yet?
Can I ask another schema question?
Yeah, no,
go for it.
And Tim will probably know what's coming. So on flexible zones, I believe the schema says that you don't include a NaPTAN code. NaPTAN isn't a required field, but ATCO is. So because we only provide ATCO codes for our flexible zones and Google uses NaPTAN codes, none of our flexible zones show up on Google.
Interestingly, Tricia, from Pivoti, I can tell you that about a quarter of the flexible zones have NaPTAN codes. And that was a question that I was going to quietly prompt, but you have answered it.
No, with people's, fingers in ears, Tim would say, well, just put them in. The schema says don't, but just do it. But
yeah,
with NaPTAN codes being, because it's based on the old SMS and texting, it would be, you would have used the NaPTAN codes to text to find when your next bus is, and how would you text to find the next bus for a flexible route? Where would you how would you know to get on a bus? But I don't actually know how, because NTS is for Nottinghamshire, and then you've got the next number of characters as letters. There's not going to be an infinite number of only specific letters you can use, and so if you're suddenly in the thousands of stops, you then don't want to waste them on stops you don't need them on.
Yeah, and this is also in the given that very, very few people use T9 anymore, this is another longer question, and we're not going to talk about it more than just me run this past you today, and leave it as a thought that you might want to bring to another meeting. If almost nobody uses T9, which is the text entry based on the 9 on the keypad from 0 to 9, if almost nobody uses those type phones anymore, does NaPTAN codes now still need to meet the T9 regulations, or can the creation of NaPTAN codes be opened wider to not have to conform to textability T9 regulations? Because it's a bit like cleardown codes, where the technology has moved along but the schema has not. And this is a bit of street versus schema, which I might run in a couple of months' time, but I'm just going to leave that thought with you, not to do too much. And I'm going to swing back to Paul and just ask the question, which was, Flex and Hail and Ride don't need bearings, but your system, there appears to be something in your system that says that they have to have bearings. Is that correct? And we can talk about this in a bit more detail.
I have to ask a developer. It's beyond what I know off the top of my head.
Yeah, we can sit down and have a longer chat about the strictness of some systems versus the strictness of what we allow in NaPTAN currently, and whether we need to get stricter or you need to get a bit looser, or if you can be a bit looser and what impacts that would have. Keith, do you demand bearings for Flex and HAR? Because I love the fact that we went through all of the stuff on bearings for HAR, only for Tim to gain some points, but also have nil points, for pointing out that in the schema you don't need bearings for Hail and Rides. So Keith, sorry, that was a very long question. Do you have to have bearings for Flex and Hail and Rides in React? I'm not sure if Keith is online at the moment. He might still be coming back. We'll come back to that one. This is one of the reasons I wish I had access. This is just dropping a hint to Paul and Keith. I wish I had access to all the different systems that our users use, so I could get a much better understanding of some of the nuances of different people's worlds. And if you would be so inclined to give DFT NaPTAN Group some temporary access or something like that, that would be amazing, and we can certainly have discussions. But let's move along to answering the next kind of tricky question. And this is me trying to draw, so excuse my crazy drawings. You can have fixed stops within a flexible zone. So here we've got a rail station, a doctor's, a school, and a supermarket that are fixed stops within a flex zone. Is this possible? And then also, if you're trying to do timing around fixed stops in a timetable inside of a flex zone, how do you do it? Because this is going to be one of the things that Tim and Bods are probably going to be facing, of like the insanity of flex, fixed, but it's the same flex zone that they keep going back to. Just wanted to ask how you think about it so that we can have a bit more of a concept.
They're completely different things, aren't they? So the fact that fixed stops exist within a zone isn't relevant. So basically, in a timetable, in inverted commas, an operator would say that they operate within that flexible zone. And again, for me, wearing a slightly different trapeze hat, there are multiple different types of demand response and community transport schemes, some of which have, door to door, some of which are sort of corner to corner, some might have sort of semi NaPTANs or whatever you want to call it. So there's no such thing. Some run to a nominal timetable within the zone, and the zone could be a village and it's in the village about 10 o'clock in the morning. So in data terms, and again, not all DRT schemes I think can be use this, but the idea being that there might be some fixed stops. There might be a zone representing a village, and it will stop anywhere in that village if you ring up and ask, sort of thing. And so the Trans Exchange will use the village flexible zone code, and then it will appear somehow in a journey planner or a timetable with a note. But it's the fact that bus operates in the zone is completely independent to the bus stops, the fixed stops that might also exist in that zone.
Okay. That's really good to understand, because I was trying to, because this might be slightly different for some of these DRTs, and independent to fixed stops. Tricia, is that how your ones work, or yours understand it?
It is. So I have villages that have one stop and villages that have multiple stops, and the zones are quite large. The pinpoint that I use for my flexible zone, I usually try and pick the main stop in the village, but actually our DRT works in such a way that yes, it's a flexible zone, but we direct people to their nearest bus stops. So,
So yours is very much like the one I've been playing with. Yes,
but not in that way at all. So we create the flexible zone just for data purposes. But the service itself will pick up at any stop in the village, but not necessarily just outside somebody's house. It still will do that. Because it now runs through an app. When it's on the phone, somebody can phone up and say, can you pick me up outside my house, please? That's for my semi-fix. But because we have an app and we have to direct the bus somewhere and the person somewhere, because it's very much like an Uber situation.
Yeah.
So we have to define a point that the person needs to go to wait for a bus. So we've specified that we're not a taxi service, and we want to and so what we don't want is stopping every 100 yards picking people up when they can all gather in the same place because they're all traveling at the same time. And if you need a taxi service, go and get a taxi. If you can't walk to a bus stop because you have needs that mean that you can't really walk past your door, we would direct them to community transport, because it's probably a better option for them, because they can help them out of the house and take them to various appointments. If you can't walk to a bus stop, then you're not necessarily walking around doing shopping or walking to your medical appointment or to hospital. You need a door-to-door service. And I know that some DRTs will be do offer that door-to-door service, but ours doesn't.
Cool. Some DRTs do some DRT do door to door. Ian, anything to add from your DRTs?
In our area, the flex areas we have are for the NOTS DRT. So mindful of that, Trisha's covered it all excellently.
Okay, cool. Fantastic. Actually, I'll just. I had a question of how does a user know where the nearest pickup point is within a flex. I was playing around with, I think it's one from High Wycombe, just because
that looks very much like my app. So
possibly it's the same one. Because I'm sure it's the same provider. So they directed me to walk 15 meters because I had no idea of the size of the journey that I was attempting to book. And literally you could walk it in 2 minutes because I'd zoomed in slightly further than I realized. But they directed me to walk to a bus stop that was within a few minutes, and I was like, okay, but now I understand from Trisha's explanation as to why this happens. So that's really good. I'm going to quickly truck on. Super quick, naming and ATCO codes. Do I do anything in the name or the ATCO code that says this is a DRT or a flex or anything like that?
So in our common names for us, because we have a service called NOTS Bus On Demand, that's the name of the service. The common name is NOTS Bus On Demand, and then under street we call it demand responsive area, so that if somebody was trying a journey plan, they'd understand that it's not necessarily quite a bus stop. So I wouldn't put as the street where I've put my pin. I'd put that it's a demand responsive area.
Gotcha. That sounds really sensible. Do you do anything with the ATCO code, like put dirt or flicks in them or anything like that?
No, because we have a very set of our own rules. So all of our stops beyond the 3300 code start with the district that they're in as letters, and then we just go up in number. Right. But I can see why actually in the ATCO code, adding in FLX or HAR would be useful. But once you've created an ATCO code, you then can't go back in and amend it. So no, they're they're one-shot wonders. Ian, any quick thoughts before I kind of zoom along to do a little bit of user testing? Because you're
nothing further, no, on that.
Brilliant. No, that's really good. I'm not going to ask about the location to the polygon because that's a bit you've all talked about where you put the centers and things like that. So I get it. The bearings, we'll come back to that at some point. We run past what I forgot to ask about Flex, because having trapeze on here and 2 trapeze users is really fascinating, because I want to do some quick user testing with you on removing a stop. So completely changing tact. If you remember a couple of months ago, I talked about how we're going to do managed removal. So we want to get rid of the stops that no longer physically exist. The road has changed completely. HS2 has come through and that road no longer exists, and those stops have disappeared, or you've torn down the bus station and you've built a shopping centre on top of it and created a whole pile of new bus stops, but those old bus stops need to be removed. They're physically removed from the world, but they're still hanging around in NaPTAN. Now, I know that in the past there was some sort of thing that ran at some point. Trying to figure out when exactly it ran has been a bit of a mish. Also figuring out why it didn't pick up some stuff that it should have has also been a bit of a mission. So we then went, okay, we're going to do this whole new thing. So what we're doing, in short, is we have created something called a managed remove list. So we're managing the removal of a stop from NaPTAN. We've created a list called managed removed or removed that we can then publish out to Amy and people like that, so they can say, if you're using any stop on this list, please don't, because the stop is dead, it doesn't physically exist, and I think you've made a mistake in your data. So we want to look at how we get stops onto that list and what local authorities need to do. So we have created a little service that we have just private beated. So when you log in and you've got access to this, you'll get a little link that says remove NaPTAN stops. When you click on that, you'll come to a page that looks like this that tells you what we're going to do. So we check that we can safely remove the stop. We give you a chance to review that you've got the right stop, because typos, this is a one-way system, it's not reversible. And then we confirm it's removed. And then when it's done, you can then remove the stop from your local data and republish your NaPTAN file. Now, Paul, I understand that you may not allow people to remove stops just yet, and this will be one of the things that you and I sit down with your development team and talk about what we're trying to do and how your system would handle this. Does that kind of fit with everybody so far?
I may have missed the start of this process, but this is stops that have already been marked as deleted or archived, whatever the flag is in NaPTAN, or is this you can remove an active stop?
So if you're trying to remove an active stop, we should be able to catch that if it's used within a service. So we've taken away the time something needs to sit around for a couple of years and decompose. No, we don't think so, because that was about getting it out of people's schedules. So we actually do an explicit check for that. So I'll talk you through what we do and then see whether or not I've answered that kind of question for you. So when you click on start, you come through, and we have the simplest form ever. You put in your ATCO code and you press check stop. There is nothing else. There was a lot of questions of, do I need to explain what an ATCO code is? And I'm like, if you've got access to this and you do not know what an ATCO code is, I really, really worry seriously. So we just ask for the ATCO code, and then this allows you to review the stop information. So this gives you the ATCO code, confirms the common name in the locality and the bearing, if it's got one. And then we do 3 checks. We make sure that it's already in NaPTAN, because what we don't want is people to remove stops before they existed. So to block out a number of NaPTAN codes, for example. We then check whether it's already in the remove list. And then we check if it's in published routes. So we use TNDS at the moment. We search through all of TNDS for the ATCO code you've given us and confirm if there's any that nobody is using this. And then if that's all fine, it'll come up and you can tick on a box that you understand what you're about to do, and you click on confirm removal. And then when you've confirmed removed, it comes up and it says, you have successfully marked this as removed. It's in there. You now need to remove it from your local system and publish a new NaPTAN file without this in. If you publish a file with the stop in, it will create an alert and not allow you to publish the file. So it is a blocker, and we did it that way to ensure that everyone, when people came on board, they came on for the full system, and there wasn't chances of stops coming with the same ATCO code coming back in, because we're using this as like a blocker for a whole pile of systems. Does this make sense to everybody as to what we've tried to do in terms of getting stops that are dead, that are physically no longer in existence, out of the system?
Sounds dangerous to me. Can you just explain how the removed list gets created? Because I'm not understanding. I can see that this will cause all sorts of problems. Okay,
it's really simple. At the point where you click confirm removal, we add that ATCO code to a list, to a data set, and we can then publish that. We then publish that data set for anyone to consume. So this is a list of all of the ATCO codes that have been completely withdrawn from service. So that's what we've called it, remove, rather than archive or delete, because you were using archive and delete and cancel. There was a whole, I will share with you a service design which has all of the history behind why we ended up at managed remove, and all of the data analysis that went into that.
So I can enter an NaPTAN that's active and in use by services, but I can still delete it.
No, you cannot delete it if it is in use by services, and I was about to get through to that.
Okay.
So if it's in use by services, we will pop up. We have this one, just moving across to find the right. Here we are.
Okay.
I'm trying to find here we are. The stop cannot be removed because it is, no, that's the wrong one. Sorry, there are 7 different, here we are. It was the first one straight after what I was looking at. The stop cannot be removed because it is currently in use in one or more published routes.
Okay.
Now, the next layer of this is we will then tell Tricia or Ian what those published routes are and who those bus operators are. So they can go and talk to that bus operator and go, you're using a stop that we would like to remove, and this could be for any reason, like its road no longer exists, or one of the other examples thinking of is that there's been a serious accident at the site and we need to close that stop and move it to another part because it's been determined that that's not a safe place to have a bus stopping or something like that. You know, there's all different reasons for moving stops and removing stops from the system, and we want to make sure that when a stop is removed, anyone who is doing any planning of routes and that don't actually end up trying to use stops that they shouldn't. Does that make sense? Sorry, I possibly need a bit more coffee and a better diagram.
I'm trying to work out how it feels slightly arbitrary that a local authority user can go in and just type a NaPTAN code in here and remove it with what the risks are of allowing them to do that, or what the rules are by which they would even come to this screen and try and get a stop deleted.
I think there is this deletion point is a very long way down a lot of processes. So the removal of a stop physically from the world is usually what drives this. So, and one of the problems that we are trying to tackle is there are quite a percentage of stops. There's more than 30,000 that we've been able to figure out, and this is a rough estimate, between 20 and 30,000 stops within NaPTAN that physically no longer exist. People are putting them into the middle of the North Sea or doing all kinds of crazy things with them just to try to hide them from the system. So we're trying to find a better way of doing that, which is what this is, but also a nice sustainable way of doing this, so that in those rare instances where Tricia needs to take out a stop because the planners have determined that that road is now closed and that stop is now, the 2 bus stops that were on that road are now no longer serviceable, and
but those stops
them
have been
out.
marked as deleted in NaPTAN, so why does anyone care about them?
They haven't. They haven't though, Paul. At the moment, all we can do is mark them as inactive, and just leave them there. We used to be able to go to the DFT and say, "Can you archive all of these stops to set them to deleted?" But we can't. Right. So I have an old bus station, because the rules say you can't. That has the bus stops are still there, but it's a car park now. Right. And I could, the rules say don't reuse NaPTAN codes, but also I wouldn't have reused NaPTAN codes in this instance anyway, because the transition of old bus station to new bus station meant that I had to have 2 sets of data for routes. Yeah. So
yeah, and right. Tricia, and in that instance years ago, I don't know when it last ran reliably. Like, I cannot find any stops that have been removed from the system since 2013 to 2015 is the window somewhere where this last ran in any kind of way, and it's not run since. So there are stops that Tricia wants to remove that, and some people have set them as an active delete, some people have set them as an active archive. They're in all kinds of different states on the system, and that also depends on what software they're using and what schema version that they're able to use as well. So there was more complications in that. I'll quickly grab up the analysis and share it with you all. this is why we ended up with this service, because this meant that we could unequivocally take something out of service and then publish which ones were out of service in a way that it can be used by Amy at Travelline, it can be used by the people at BODS. It could, Paul, you could even take this into Trapeze, and should anyone try to do something with a stop that they've marked as removed, you can go, you removed that stop no longer exists. You're not allowed to put it into any planning or any published routes or anything like that, and it just provides that certainty for people to know what's removed.
We now need to know which stops the local authorities use this tool to remove, because there isn't at the minute a way of physically deleting them from the Trapeze database, because the schema doesn't allow us to do that, right? So we now need to close the feedback loop, otherwise those stops that exist in the local NaPTAN, the local Nova Trapeze system.
And this is why I want to work with you and work through what needs to happen for all the Trapeze users, because once we've got something in place that works for you and works for the local authorities, we can then slowly roll out to those local authorities. This is the world's slowest rollout. Every single person is being handheld through this because it is such a big impact on their systems and on the way that they work.
Can I just ask something?
Sure.
For me, I understand what we're trying to achieve here, but the better option would be that the local authorities manage it in their data, because that is the one source of truth. So if we had, my options are inactive or active, there's no delete, this, that and the other. So if there was a way where we could do it in our systems, that then when we exported it to you guys, you then knew actually they want to make this, then that would be better. The only alternative, Paul, for me would be that if an authority did make this change, wait for the DFT NaPTAN set to be updated, and then import a version back into Trapeze, which again has its own problems, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And another thing that maybe, so I know in certainly the Trapeze systems can be configured that when a local authority is creating a stop, it finds the lowest numbered next available stop. So if you delete one, then in theory that code becomes free again. And so when they come to create a new stop, it would go, I'll use that number. And so you create a new stop, but with the old code.
So I've shared up the service design that we went through on this. Tricia, we would have loved to have done it the way that you suggested. 147 people had done things ever so slightly differently across the entirety of the system, and it created such a nightmare. I tried to pull it together to make it make sense, and we could not. There is no way that we.
But the local authorities, sorry to cut across you, the local authority is the source of truth for NaPTAN, isn't it? And this solution dilutes
absolutely.
that now.
No, it doesn't. And Paul, have a look at that managed removal, and I'm more than happy to sit down and run through it with you and Tricia and Ian and any Trapeze people and just go through it, because it's making you the source of truth, but it's also providing that central, this is the stuff that has been removed from the system. Part of the problem was if we tried to use any of the 12 schema options that were available from the schema, people had already used it and poisoned it, and there was nothing that we could use unless we tried to change the schema, which was just as bad. So we came up with this service. We've taken it around for feedback. We've spent much of the last 6 months rolling this out to people in public meetings to get feedback on it. So I'd really, really love to, I've just shared it up in the chat, have a read through it. There's a whole section about all the data analysis and everything like that. Let me know what you think of it, and if there's any questions, come back to me.
Okay. Could we have seen, as Trapeze, should we have seen this before now? I personally am only seeing it for the first time, but I know I don't get to come to all the meetings.
You should have seen it before now, because we were talking about it consistently in all of the emails that we were sending out, and we ran 4 sessions on this.
Okay.
So, and all of those meetings are recorded and are up on the YouTube channel. So, Paul, and I'm not saying you should have caught up. I'm saying, yay, you've caught up. Let's sit down and talk about this and understand the impact on Trapeze. And this is one of the things that I've said to people. This is a private beta. We did the alpha. We did all the testing and we did the alpha to really understand it. This is now a private beta. So let's really understand where we're at with it. And if we need to make tweaks, if we need to change on this, totally up for that, because this is the stage that we're in of finding those rough edges, of finding those pieces where we haven't been able to bring part of the community on board and get people to understand it.
Is there a Word document version of this mural? It's
no
to navigate.
Essentially, if you start over on the left hand side here and just read it like the bio tapestry, there was so much stuff that we needed to do, especially spelling out all the bits for the users and everything. That's why we've spelled it out this way around. I could try and put it into a Word document, but most of the pieces end up too small to read. But I'm more than happy to come and have it and talk you through it. No problems whatsoever, although not next week, but maybe from September onwards. Give me a yell and we'll set up a meeting. And we'll sit down and figure that out. Is that okay? I feel like you've had something dumped on your lap and you're struggling to catch up with it. So I'll just skip along. But we will sit down and work with you on this and make sure that Trapeze is up to speed. Because also, thank you to you and Fraser for sorting out our Midlothian problem, or at least uploading Midlothian for the first time since 2018. So you've solved one of the things that was driving me nuts. It's like we've got like 10 minutes left. I'm not going to focus on what we want out of the managed removal, because I recognise there's quite a bit of stuff that needs to go on there. Is there anything other than managed removal that we need to talk about? Is there anything else that we need to go through today? The other thing that I just need to let you all know is, unfortunately, we lost both Haraj and Hannah at the end of this month. So Haraj has left DFT and gone off to another government department. Hannah is also doing the same. I'm still around because ain't nobody getting rid of me. But I'm also the only person running the mailbox, the group mailbox at the moment. We are currently recruiting a new product owner, and we're also looking for some people to help, somebody within DFT to help out with the mailbox. So if you send us a mail and it takes more than a goodly time for us to get back to you, I'm really sorry. It is literally, I'm trying to do this on top of the regular stuff that I'm doing and everything else that I'm doing. And it's sometimes the mailbox just isn't, I look at it and I go, I need to get onto that, and it makes it onto my to-do list. And my to-do list can sometimes take about 2 to 3 weeks to get down to that point. So I'm really sorry if that's annoying people. We are doing our best to get the resourcing fixed.
I'm
Tricia,
sorry that, I was about to say I'm sorry that I chased something up, but I thought I'd left it a good period of time before I chased.
But also, Tricia, you got caught out between my leave and Haraj's leave and Hannah's leave. Between the three of us, there was also a point there where we all thought the other one had answered some questions, and I am now, me and Sarah, who's the delivery manager, in September, when we get a bit of a headspace again, we're going to go through the mailbox and just kind of make sure that everything's been answered, that everything has been followed up on, because there's some things I know Haraj was following up on, but I don't have the notes for it. So I might have to run back and go from the start on a couple of bits again. I'm sorry. I can't remember what your one was. I'm going to stop sharing and then just double check, because it's
inactive 9400 codes for platforms.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how they became active. inactive, and that is one of my because
Well,
as well as fixing
I'm
it.
wondering if it was an auto, because what's happened is that the Nottingham Tram aren't very good at giving us what platforms each individual trip runs from, and it's taken us many years, and they eventually provided that to us. So originally the tram data, we just set it to one platform because we didn't know. But we have 4 ends of routes, and only 2 end of routes have 2 of the platforms inactive. The other end of routes don't. So I wondered whether it was because it was a platform that wasn't being shown in data, and therefore, so
No.
I just don't know how or where it's gone inactive.
What I was more worried about, because we made some changes, Haraj and I were making some changes at people's requests, and there's been a couple of weird little things just because we're editing a file, hand editing a file currently, and it was more, had Haraj or I kind of messed up and put a typo in somewhere? The answer appears to be no. That was my biggest question. I will. You're on my to-do list. You're on my to-do list, so that will get done.
Yeah. It's only because we now know which platforms each individual trip goes from. I had a colleague painstakingly have to put in a 5-minute manual every single tram stop service into the system, and then we got NaPTAN errors, and I was like, oh no.
Okay. I will. It is on my to-do list. I will try to crack on with that. It'll probably be early September when I get to it, just because
Thank you.
holidays and a few things. So trying to get new staff in. So let me go and it's just making those 2 from inactive to active, and making sure that we do increment the version and increment whether it was revised, and those little things also haven't been happening, which makes some of just checking when something happened a little bit tricky. So sorry it's impacted you, Tricia. I just wanted to be honest and let you know what's going on. It's not as not caring, it's just it's now one person.
Well, the way I've got round it, and it's naughty travel line wise, Amy, close your ears, is that I've put the same platform in my data twice, so that once I'm able to use the platform again, I'll just switch one of them. So rather than change the times and times again, I've just added the same platform in twice. So
I'm sure that's completely fine. I'm sure Amy and Tim are both just enjoying your solution there. So right at the end of the mural, there's just a little feedback corner. I'm using this to try to figure out what I should do better on these meetings. And Paul, one of them is when I find someone who's not engaged with, it's never your fault. It's because honestly, we are doing everything we can to connect to everybody, but we know emails get missed. We know that these things happen. And that's one of the reasons why, especially on the rollout of this managed removal, we have been incredibly slow. So we started talking about this. I think I was doing all the data research in March, April, and we started talking about it from April onwards. But so I am worried that you've been missed. I am worried who else has been missed, and who else will need to know this, that this will create problems for them. But what I want to do is we'll have a meeting in September, and we'll go through that managed removal. If you just read it like the Bayou Tapestry, everything just flows left to right. Any side notes, the side panels and that are generally above. I know it sounds ridiculous to call them a side panel and put them above, but if you just keep reading horizontally, hopefully it will start to make some sense. The first part's about the personas, then it's the data and what questions we needed to ask of each of those different types of people. The next one's about the data analysis, and then it was all of the rollout plan, all of the people that we spoke to and all of the meetings that we had, and then it's kind of on to how the new service works. And there's about 3 or 4, there's a couple of versions because we had to go and we had a first flow and then we had a second flow because we needed to put a little confirmation step in. So I drew that out for the team. And then we also had to work through the bulk removal of stops. So when we onboard anybody, we're going to take that backlog that they've got and deal with it programmatically. But it's a one-off. It just means that anyone who's got, like Trish, you've probably got a couple of hundred at least floating around of stops, like those bus stops that were a bus station. With the removal of the bus station, we just want to catch up on that, make it easy for people to give us that backlog, and we can clear it for them so they're starting with a clean slate.
What I'd like to see in NaPTAN as well is one of the rules was that you couldn't reuse a NaPTAN code if it was more than 100 meters moving it to. When we have new housing developments built and the road comes out right where the stops are, I must admit I do still move it beyond the 100 meters anyway. But
So
have it,
yeah.
But recently I've also moved stops around in again against the rules, but I've moved them around in a business park because the business park stopped being served 10 years ago. We're back in, but going a different route. So I have actually moved them to completely different roads, which technically I'm not supposed to do. But
this is where the street versus schema. I'm potentially, and this is where Tim needs to block his ears, I'm potentially a little bit more relaxed about some of these extra to the rules that were applied, because as far as I'm aware, within the schema, there isn't that rule. It was just a business rule that was applied on top. It was like a code of practice that was never written down or documented that much. It just became it would pop up as a rule on some systems but not others, or it would be an email from somebody, and I wiped all of those out, all 136 that I could find of those extra business rules, and we've been running without them for a bit, and we seem to be doing okay. But it's now trying to look at how we help local authorities maintain that really good data quality and really good understanding of the systems.
I mean, all of the rules were put in place because something went wrong somewhere and somebody had to, do something to correct. So, it's appropriate to review them.
Thanks, Tim. No, it's
the challenge becomes when people aren't updating their NaPTAN data set. So operators and the likes of Google and things like that, because the stops will show in the wrong place for a period of time.
And that's a lot of what we're kind of wanting to encourage, because we've now got an API, so that means that people don't even have to think about updating it. They can just set their systems to pull an update. It's what changes people are making once they download all of the NaPTAN data and how much they need to download compared to how much has actually changed. There's entire stuff that I could spend hours and hours talking about around NaPTAN and how it could be improved. But Paul, you're probably going to get a lot of that when we catch up. You might want to book several. You might want to book several 2-hour meetings with me, and just be bemused at the passion of which I can talk about data and bus stops. But I'm going to call it to a halt there because I've got to run to another meeting. Hopefully this has been useful for everybody. And it's been really great to have your energy and your feedback and your thoughts, because it's been so helpful for us to make sure that we're in the right place. And drop us feedback in the feedback part if there's stuff that you like, or if there's stuff that you need me to change to make these meetings really work for you. I just want to keep them working. But thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop recording. According to Scribe, stop recording. And I will see